Good morning, everyone. Brian and I are here again for another live coaching call, talking about the Office of the vCIO. This is a series we started last week. We're going to continue for a few more weeks. And today we're talking specifically about the role of the vCIO. And Brian, we kind of want to start this off with talking about who should be the vCIO.
Yeah, today's really going to focus on what does it take to be the vCIO. And a lot of the companies that I work with have different interpretations of who should be the vCIO, who shouldn't be the vCIO, what does that role entail. And hey, for what it's worth today, I'll give you my thoughts on it, right? So, who should be the vCIO? I'm going to talk a little bit about things in phases to kind of kick off. As you're getting started, there's only one person that can be the vCIO, and that is your owner. Realistically, a lot of MSPs start with owner-led sales, but they're also the trusted point within the organization. They're the people that the customers feel strongly about, and they are the people that probably have the most technical and business knowledge on your team, at least at that stage. So, the business owner needs to be the person assuming that role until they get to a point that they feel like they've scaled out the team enough or have brought on somebody or can pool a team of people, as we're talking about with the Office of vCIO, to really run that resource or run that meeting on their behalf. The second place that I see a lot of vCIOs coming from these days are account managers. But I want to make a big distinction between account managers and sales reps, right? And really, the big distinction is hunters versus farmers or hunters versus hunter gatherers. A pure play inside style sales rep or somebody that's really incented to hunt or somebody that you look at and say that guy's a born sales guy but he doesn't really get the business is not necessarily the best resource to be the vCIO. And we'll get into some of the qualities of the vCIO in a couple minutes, but just think of this. When they come in the door, they're usually hitting somebody over the head with a hammer to get the deal done. So if they come in as the vCIO, oftentimes they've got that dollar sign, if I did that right, on their forehead. And the customer will not have that trust or confidence that they can talk about the other side and have their best interests at heart as opposed to their own interests. So when I talk about the account manager, I'm talking about the people that you bring on to grow your accounts. Or that hunter farmer who has to play both sides of the role. So sometimes they're wearing the sales hat to get the job done, but other times they're wearing the consultant hat and really helping guide the customer through what your solutions are going to be. Now, the third role starts getting into some specificity. Today, that's a tough word for me. And that is your technical account managers. And this follows a lot of what the early days of QBRs were about when it was strictly about technical alignment. So these are the folks that understand the technology, understand it enough to be able to do an assessment and understand how to put that assessment together, but might need a little bit of coaching and training to understand the business side of life. And really, if
Sure.
you're running your business reviews as pure performance reviews or pure alignment and engineering exercises yielding a roadmap, you're missing a huge opportunity. And we'll go more into that today as well. And then the final person that could potentially fill the role of a vCIO is the right kind of engineer. And what I mean by that is the engineer that has people skills. If anybody remembers Office Space, I bring the reports to the engineers because they can't talk to people. And, the reality is you have to have an engineer that knows the tech but doesn't go so deep into the tech that when you ask them what time it is, they tell you how the watch was made. We want to make
Sure.
sure that we have a technician who can speak to an end user, speak to a customer, and they're a rare breed too, but they're out there. And a lot of you that are, founder-led organizations, you find out that you're probably your most trusted engineer has some of those skills. So those are really the four
Yeah.
roles I see more often than not go into the vCIO space, Rachel.
Great. And you mentioned, not putting your hunters in this position because they don't necessarily have the right personality traits.
Yeah.
So maybe we want to dive more into what are the personality traits and why a hunter is not exactly the best person.
No doubt, no doubt. So, first thing is let's talk about the traits of a great vCIO, and this will dovetail into that direct question you just gave to me. First thing is they got to have confidence. They need to be able to command a room and really take charge. Their role is to be part of the customer's leadership team. So if you wouldn't bring that sales rep into your own boardroom or that person in that seat into your own boardroom, then how are they going to be effective if they have to be in your client's boardroom, right? So the
Yeah.
vCIO is filling two gaps, right? One is it's being an advocate, and that's another part of this job. They need to be somebody that listens to the customer and has enough strength to bring it back to the team and stand firm where they have to. Both teams' interests have to be held in regard here. It's not a us versus them type situation. And going back to the confidence, they have to be able to go into that room, feel confident in leading that session, and not be intimidated by high ranking officials at the client site.
Yeah.
Sales reps who are in the hunter mode usually are not yet seasoned enough to really feel super confident talking leadership style to CIOs and CEOs. They may feel comfortable from a sales perspective telling them the solution, but not when it gets to bigger picture on how it could potentially impact their business from a beyond just solving a problem, but the fiscal side of things, the productivity side of things, and the workflow side of things.
Sure.
Another killer quality that they have to have is empathy. You have to know that when there's a problem, the customer's feeling it. It's not, I wish they wouldn't, I wish they weren't calling us. I wish it wasn't a problem. You have to understand that things roll downhill. I used to always say this to my reps because my job when I was an MSP owner was anytime things got bad, shield my team, take the hit on my shoulders. And to this day, nobody's jumped across a desk and hit me. So that hasn't been a huge problem. But the point is, if you're empathetic to it and understand the person that's yelling at you either is directly impacted because they're a business owner and they're feeling some sort of loss, or it's trickling downhill. They've got
Yeah.
somebody on their back and they're relieving that stress with you. So you've got to be empathetic, accept it. You can defend your position. You can certainly make your point of view. This isn't walk in like a doormat, and that goes back to the confidence statement. But be empathetic that you understand that this is impacting them in that moment and that you need to take the steps that you can do to shorten whatever the time window is to get it to resolution. So, empathy sounds very basic, but sometimes we forget about it in the heat of battle.
Absolutely. I'm just gonna real quick rabbit trail off of that. In a past life, I worked in the food service industry, and this was a big thing that we talked about a lot, especially when I worked at a really high-end uh, cafe in the Upper West Side in New York. And you would have people coming in constantly for their first cup of coffee of the morning on their way to the office. And most of the time, people were really nice and just happy to see you. But every now and then, you'd get that person who'd had a terrible morning and the line is long and they take it out on you. And you have to take a moment, take a step back, and realize this is not about me.
Yeah.
I'm doing my job. I'm doing my job well. This person is having a terrible day. And my job is to try to be a little bright spot in that day and fix the problem of giving them the coffee.
And
It's the same thing.
it's spot on. The reality is you're going to go home to your family who loves you, and that moment will be forgotten. And even with our clients, we may love them, and obviously we're going to have to face them again. But at the end of the day, you can only control what you can control. But you got to remain in control, and one of the ways to do that is certainly to be empathetic to the plight they're feeling, right?
Absolutely.
Now, a couple other qualities that I think are important, we'll just kind of touch upon, and we'll be going deeper into these over the weeks too. But having some basic business acumen. To be a leader, to be a vCIO, you need to go out and actually understand a little bit about business. Understand a little bit
Yeah.
about budgeting. Have at least a cursory knowledge of what a profit and loss sheet is and why costs matter to your customer. You need to be able to kind of make the relationship between what the key initiatives are that the customer's chasing after and the obstacles they perceive to be in the way of success, and be able to look at technology and go, how can we support that, maybe from an automation position or better security position or making our employees more productive. Sometimes the lines are not direct, right? It's really easy to say our IT goal is ensuring strong security. Well, hey, let's put in a firewall or get a security awareness program or do something like that. But sometimes when a customer is telling you, well, one of the things that we need to do is lower the cost of production and we got to do more with less because we're probably going to have to downsize a bit. Now you got to think a little bit more creatively. Well, where are the touch points where technology might be able to fill some of the gaps that human capital will be vacating, right? Now, that's
Right.
not something that's easy for people when they get started. And certainly the more time you spend out in the field, you'll come to these things. but you got to understand a little bit about business. And, not to promote vCIO Toolbox at the moment, but inside vCIO Toolbox, we have this concept called a business canvas. The reason I share it is it's just an MBA school teaching anyway. And the business canvas allows you to really map out what drives a business. You define the value proposition. Over on the right-hand side, you're looking at all the go-to-market strategies. On the left-hand side, you're looking at all the tactics that customer has to take to achieve go-to-market. So it really helps you when you build that together and you work with a new, let's take that engineer or technician who hasn't had a lot of business time yet. And if the owner sits down with them and maps out a couple of these clients, you'll be amazed how the lightning bolts all of a sudden hit and those light bulbs come out over these guys' heads. And they start seeing how business problems can be solved through technology, and it supports that technology sale. The other thing is speaking both languages, right? While we're telling you to teach the business side here, you have to have enough technical acumen that you, at least in your mind's eye, can look at the architecture, see how it's going to be, and really understand, hey, this is what we're going to bring to the table, and this is the architecture and design that we're going to lay out for the customer. You need to know how things connect, you need to know how things impact people, and you just need to understand where the big security holes are. But like anything else, you need to know it at the 50,000 foot level. It doesn't have to be at the the detail level.
Right. It sounds like knowing something at the what, not the how.
And no doubt, you're spot on that. It doesn't have to be knowing everything about it. Again, I go back to that analogy about the watch being made. Here, you just need to be able to tell time, but make sure you're accurate. That's all. And if that
So we're going
person,
to talk about,
well,
oh, sorry, go
I was
ahead.
going to say, if I can add to that, so this is why we sometimes say that unicorn doesn't exist in your business, right?
Mm.
Because the reality is, it's hard to find this person. This is why business owners are really good at it, but it becomes tough when they go to scale it because business owners have had the opportunity now to understand business, understand technology, and really lay into these concepts. But you got to coach your team along. And this is where the Office of vCIO really comes into play because you may have to find a couple people to fill that gap and then go back to your vCIO as the quarterback and let them drive that. And that probably leads into the last thing we want to talk about today, Rachel.
Yeah, absolutely. The responsibilities of the role, how the division of labor goes.
So whether it's Division of Labor in the Office of vCIO or the vCIO taking full ownership of it, the responsibilities of the role is really staying engaged with the customer. They are the quarterback. They need to be in tune with what the customer's needs are. They need to be in tune on what's going on at the service desk that might be creating a problem that they can get out in front of and help educate to the customer that it might be coming. And they need to keep the customer's needs, kind of middle of mind in between those business review sessions. So periodic check-ins, driving those business reviews, obviously that's job number one. Job number two is gathering information from the client. They're the conduit back to home base, right? As the owners start segueing these responsibilities out to the vCIOs, they become less in tune with those customers they used to know intimately once upon a time.
Yeah.
So the vCIO's got to be the one that's educating the team to the things that are changing at a customer's environment. Are they growing? Are they decreasing in size? Are they planning mergers and acquisitions? Are they looking at new ERP softwares? Do they just have other initiatives that have nothing to do with IT that are just good to know? Because maybe if you talk to some people in your office, there's an IT solution that maps up to it. It's critical that they're getting the information from the customer, bringing it back to the office, and educating people to what the changes are so people can make the right decisions on how to serve.
Yeah.
The other thing they need to do is drive action. And this is going back to the customer side of things. The reason we do technology roadmaps are a few reasons, right? Obviously we're all looking at these business reviews as selling opportunities, but they need to be consultative selling opportunities. The customer's got to feel the win-win, otherwise they just feel like they're being sold to. So the way you drive action is setting up a concrete roadmap, helping the customer see a multi-year budget so they know where those big inflection points of cost are. Think PC refreshes. Think new locations coming on site that they've identified where extra capital be needed. None of us can find that money, on a moment's notice. You got to plan for it, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that's, we want to drive action. And the way we do that is by working with the customer so they understand their budget. They understand how those items in the budget are going to drive those business initiatives forward. So you got to build that business case for them. And that business case is really where the consulting comes in, because now they're going to make their own informed decisions. They're not just taking us on blind faith. And we can really move forward. And then when they make those decisions, we got to keep them on schedule, because we know customers will drag their feet, and we got to make sure they understand the impact. The more you drag this, these are the other things that can't get done, and this is how it's going to impact your business.
Yeah.
So, it's really critical, because we know when push comes to shove, sometimes getting that ink on the ledger can be a little bit difficult. Um, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but educating your customer too. vCIOs need to be extension of marketing. And what I mean by that, your marketing teams will put out the big blast. But when you see things that are in direct impact to your customer, whether it be a marketing blast your team put out or something you hear on the news, if you think it's a direct impact to your customer, you want to make them aware of it. It's another value
Yeah.
added touch point.
Yeah.
It helps them see that you've got their best interests at heart. And sometimes it gives you that excuse to engage with them when you have no idea what you're going to say to them. I remember when I was like a young sales rep, it was like, you got to call your customer every month. And sometimes I had nothing to say. I wasn't yet
Yeah.
in tune with this kind of stuff. And I'd be like, hey, Rachel, so how's it going? Good, Brian. Anything new?
It's great.
Nah. All right, cool, man. Well, I'll check in with you again in about a month, right? You're not building any rapport. You're not building anything there. Bring some
No.
education, say, and let them know what that means. You will get good response. And then the
Yeah.
final thing is, you are the person that needs to monitor the health of the relationship. I talk about it all the time. Anybody that's been on a demo with me has heard this: the curse of the great MSP. The more we automate, the more we do remotely, the less we're on site, and the less things tend to break. And when that happens, if we're not positioned appropriately in the customer, believe it or not, that's when our value gets called into question. How come we're
Yes.
paying $2, $5, $10,000 a month for this service when nothing breaks and we never see these guys anymore? So we need
Right.
to be in tune with how the executive team's thinking. We need to be in tune on how the end user population's feeling. And we need to be able to relay that information back to our company. So if we do identify relationship risk, we can take the steps to mitigate the problem as soon as possible and minimize the issue before it becomes a large one. So, you can really see the role of the vCIO can be a critical role, but it's a leadership role. It's an opportunistic role, because you become part of the customer, you embed yourself into their landscape, and the information that comes back is going to drive success back to your business. It's the circle of life, and we'll be talking more about that when we talk about engineers. So that's really kind
Amazing.
of my 2 cents for today, Rachel. Any thoughts as we go to close?
I just think, really remembering that it is a balancing act with this role,
Yeah,
that having a strict customer facing person may not always be great because they can't talk about tech. Having a strict tech person is not the best because they always don't always know business or customer success. Having a strict business person is not always best.
Yeah, if you
And et
don't have
cetera, et
somebody
cetera,
that
et
can fill
cetera.
all these skills, figure out where the gaps are, where I told you, and who can fill it. If you've got young vCIOs, business owners, you might have to hang on to that role. Not the role of prep, getting ready, and all those things that take the time, but you may still need to be part of those first few meetings. So
Yeah.
your counterpart, the person that is going to take that role, can hear how you structure the meeting, get the feedback, and then you guys can do a debriefing, which will only make them stronger. So it's OJT, right? On the job training, and that makes it a lot easier. And now it knocks your burden as the owner down to maybe an hour and a half. The meeting itself in a half hour to get briefed, so you know what you got to do, but you're not doing all the other pieces. If your account man
Sure.
or if your VCIOs are not technical, make sure the engineering team's part of this, and make sure the leadership of the engineering team understands this is a critical component to the overall business success. Because techs will view this without any supporting detail as busy work. So we'll talk more about that when we talk about the engineer. But you can see very quickly you can reach to your bench to fill these gaps. And as a collective, the Office of vCIO, make sure these things get attended to, because that's where customer success and customer experience is born.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Brian.
Thank
And
you, Rachel.
yeah, of course. And again, we'd love to hear from all of you. Drop a comment, post on the in the group. Let us know what you're thinking, what you have questions about. I know we just had a question about hard and soft skills for customer success. So that's if that's a conversation you want to jump into, it's there
Please
on the
do.
group right now. And we'll be doing this again next week, continuing with building out the office of the vCIO and deep diving into the different roles and responsibilities.
And I think next week, Rachel, just to give everybody kind of a sneak preview, we are going to be going into the role of the engineer and the tech as it relates to the vCIO process.
Amazing. That's definitely the part that I know the most about.
Yeah, so Rachel will be very quiet next week. You get to get more of me because that's what everybody wants.
I'll just ask lots of questions. It'll be great.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you everybody that joined us today, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.
Yeah, thanks.